The Amazing Digital Circus is an animated show produced by Glitch Productions, with its pilot being dropped in 2023, and since then, it has become objectively one of the most successful indie animated shows in the history of the internet. With the pilot episode having nearly 400 million views, the popularity of this show cannot be denied. And arguably, one of the main appeals of this show is the characters. The cast is small, with only 8 reoccurring characters, but each character is incredibly unique with a very memorable design. And, as is customary for every fandom, there is, of course, shipping. Now, considering the cast is so small, there are only a handful of notable ships that are consistently discussed in the fandom. I would say one of the most popular ships in the Amazing Digital Circus is Abstragedy, the ship between Zooble and Gangle. Unsurprisingly so based on their dynamic, they have one of the best dynamics in the show. There are also ships between Ragatha and Pomni, or Kane and Pomni, that are quite popular as well. I personally was a fan of Ragatha and Pomni almost immediately, and is still a ship that I really like. But there is one ship in the fandom that I have slowly become more of a fan of. That being the ship between Pomni and Jax, aka Funnybunny. Now, Jax is a strange character to discuss from a fandom perspective. No one seems to really have a neutral opinion on him, but this kind of disparity is also what makes him so interesting to analyze. For context, Jax is an asshole. There is no other way to put it. He's a shitty guy who always bullies and belittles the other characters. However, he is also undoubtedly a popular character. Ever since the pilot dropped, people believed his character would be more complex as the show went on. People believed he had a reason for his behavior, that he was more complicated and would be given a more sympathetic portrayal in future episodes. And of course, people were interested in his relationships with the other characters, particularly Pomni. Funnybunny was a notable ship essentially right away, probably because they were the two most popular characters, probably because people believed Pomni could help redeem Jax. Either way, Funnybunny was popular from the beginning. Now, I will be completely transparent. At first, I did not really like this ship. I wouldn't say I hated it. It's very hard for me to really hate a ship, but I didn't really get it, so to say. But that has changed. Post episode 6, I have fully metamorphosized into a Funnybunny shipper. I am willingly on board a sinking ship, and I couldn't be happier. So what happened? What changed? Why am I now a Funnybunny shipper? Let's discuss. So admittedly, part of why Funnybunny didn't really grab me at first was their dynamic didn't really have a lot of screen time at first. They had minimal interactions, and their base dynamic didn't really interest me in the way that Ragatha and Pomni's did. They have brief interactions in the first 4 episodes, but nothing really stood out to me. The one scene that caught my eye was in episode 4, Fast Food Masquerade, when an exhausted Jax goes up to Pomni and attempts to talk to her, asking her about the day so far. This definitely was a sign to me that Jax might be more willing to open up than first assumed, but for the first 4 episodes, the dynamic was focused on Jax messing with Pomni and pissing her off. This was essentially what created the conflict in episodes 2 and 3. But episode 5 is when things started to really change, when Jax's desire to get closer to Pomni became more clear. He eventually grows a closer connection with her over the course of the episode, resulting in them genuinely developing a connection, and by the end of the episode, the two are properly friends. This friendship carries on into the 6th episode, and of course is completely destroyed by the end of it, but we will talk about that in a second. But I will say, by episode 5, I would say I was dipping my toes into the Funnybunny water, if you get what I mean. You know, looking at some fan art, reading some fan fiction, just to sort of feel out the vibes of the ship. And I definitely was beginning to properly see the appeal. I should also admit that part of my issue with Funnybunny at first was its portrayal in the fanon. Now, a lot of the times, a ship will be completely different in fanon compared to its canon counterpart. But in some cases, this fanon portrayal can be annoying to some people, because there are many examples of ships that are fine on paper, but the fan content doesn't properly capture its potential. For myself at first, and for many people I know, Funnybunny was one of those ships, particularly in how Pomni was depicted. Now, this is pretty common with hetero ships specifically, but there are a lot of times where a ship will sort of infantilize one of the characters in the ship. Now, I have an entire video on infantilization in fandom, so I won't go too in-depth in this, but I've mentioned how some people will often subconsciously write one character in a ship to be more consistently vulnerable and in need of protection, and in hetero ships, 99.9% of the time the victim of this is the female character. I probably don't need to give a whole lecture on the nature of gender roles and internalized misogyny to explain why this happens so often. You likely can guess why this is the case, but my point is this has often affected my ability to enjoy content regarding specific ships. I don't hate these ships, to be clear, but there are some ships that I can definitely point to and confirm that the fandom portrayal has affected my ability to personally ship something. What I'm trying to get at is Funnybunny was one of those ships for me. And that's largely because Pomni is a character so often misunderstood and infantilized by the fandom, something that, ironically, the show itself has poked fun at due to Pomni's design.
I'm not a child, you don't have to hype me up. I'm 25 years old.
But also, Pomni as a character and as a protagonist is a strange case. She's meant to be more of a straight man figure struggling to adjust to this strange and chaotic world, but because she spent the first 3 episodes very anxious and panicked, that was sort of her primary character trait at first, and anxious characters do tend to be commonly infantilized, so it's not really surprising that this happened to her, but it did affect how Pomni was portrayed in ships, especially in the case of Funnybunny. And I should clarify, I know for a fact that this is the case for Funnybunny specifically, because Pomni's characterization when it comes to Ragapom, aka Button Blossom, is completely different. Now, this is maybe because Ragatha is an even more anxious character than Pomni, but Pomni is portrayed as a lot more confident in this ship specifically. Compared to Jax, who is a rude and mischievous character, it's really not surprising that Funnybunny gained a reputation in the fandom for mischaracterizing Pomni. Even now, I know people who still cannot enjoy this ship due to that characterization. But why did I change my mind? How did I get converted to the Funnybunny side? Well, we need to first set the stage with episode 5, Untitled. June 20th, 2025, the day that changed the Funnybunny Nation forever. Episode 5 is a strange beast in the context of the wider show, largely because it is so packed with content in only 25 minutes, not helped by the fact that the episode goes by at a rapid-fire pace through many different scenes, so I will be going through the episode and discussing the most relevant moments. The first 2 that stand out to me are the President Pomni and anime sequence scenes, where Jax seems to be making an effort to genuinely engage with Pomni. The President scene could easily be brushed off as him trying to mess with her at first glance, but the anime scene is a little harder to justify with that. Those 2 scenes are very brief, but they set up Jax's growing interest in Pomni and desire to reach out to her that plays an important part in the rest of the episode. Now, the stargazing scene, however, is when things get really interesting. This is the scene where Jax's interest in Pomni becomes so clear it's basically undeniable. Much like the brief exchange in episode 4, Jax genuinely communicates with her. No jokes, no schemes, just honest conversation. At first, Pomni seems a little suspicious of his intentions, but she does engage with Jax. They laugh, they joke around with each other, and have fun like friends would. This conversation is also very important for Jax's character, because we get our first hint at Ribbit's existence, also known as the friend Jax had, who abstracted. This is when every aspect of Jax as a character shifts. Everything we thought we knew about Jax has now been put into question, and I think Pomni felt the same way in that moment. She doesn't push much further, but she's an observant character. She likely came to the same conclusions that we all did as fans. Also, going into my own theories about the show and the nature of abstraction, I think when Jax complains about Ragatha's words losing meaning, I honestly think it's possible he was referring more to his own words losing meaning for Ribbit rather than Ragatha's words. After the intermission, we get the bar scene, which is a really nice, calm scene of all the characters discussing their lives pre-Circus. It's a surprisingly realistic and down-to-earth scene with some really funny bits, but I bring it up because this is where we start to get hints of Ragatha's jealousy in regards to Jax bonding with Pomni. I bring this up because this is important for episode 6, so I want everyone to keep that in the back of their minds. I also want to point out the fact that Jax is more in line with his bastard persona in this scene compared to the previous one. Maybe the reminder of what he lost pushed him back into the asshole mode. Maybe he's trying to make sure no one thinks about what Ragatha said. Regardless, he still is reaching out to Pomni the entire time. Interesting. After that, the final adventure, the softball match. This is also where we get Jax in a maid dress. That's not relevant to Funnybunny, I just wanted to remind everyone it exists. But this is also where we see Jax and Pomni as friends be properly cemented. We see them talking while sitting at the benches, even though Jax is miserable the entire adventure for no reason in particular. He still communicates with Pomni in a more casual, friendly way. Pomni even seems to think his violence against evil Jax is funny. The episode ends with them back at the circus and still hanging out. Perhaps this is the moment that Pomni sees Jax as more than a one-sided asshole, potentially aided by Ragatha's hints. Pomni realized that there was more to Jax than one would initially assume, and it is important to note that Jax throughout all of this is engaging with Pomni and opening up to her. He's able to be more vulnerable around her, and I think this is because his relationship with Pomni lacks the baggage his other relationships have. Pomni is a fresh start. She doesn't know the context of what has happened to make him this way, and I think there is a part of Jax that still desires that connection, so he instinctively reaches out to Pomni because the relationship is so fresh in comparison to his relationships with the others, relationships that he has pretty much ruined. And because Pomni is able to see him as more than just a trickster, she gives him the space to be more vulnerable. Now, episode 6. Episode 6 is jam-packed with character content on all fronts, but especially for Jax and Pomni's relationship. The episode literally begins with them in the middle of a conversation, and as they team up for the adventure, they have a lot of really great moments together, making it clear that they've developed a strong bond in between episodes. But there are a few moments I really want to highlight. First, their conversation in the halls where we get a glimpse into Jax's mentality about the circus. He sees himself and everyone around him as just cartoon characters. They may have been human in the past, but not anymore, so it doesn't matter what happens to them because they're just cartoons. It doesn't matter what he does or what anyone does to him. Pomni, meanwhile, still sees herself and everyone else as humans with human emotions. This is where the main conflict of their relationship lies. Pomni sees Jax as a human person, Jax sees himself as a cartoon character. And while Pomni decides she's going to be evil for the day, it's clear she's just playing around. It's not her actual character. While Jax dedicated his whole personality to his trickster act. Now I sure hope nothing bad happens as a result of this discrepancy. I also want to talk about Ragatha's claim that Jax is trying to corrupt Pomni. A claim that causes Jax to become seriously enraged, shooting her several times before switching back to his sarcastic trickster persona when Pomni finds him. This, to me, makes it very clear that Jax hates the idea that he's dragging Pomni down, that he's corrupting her, that he has malicious intentions with her. Now, is he upset because of reasons related to Ribbit? Or is he upset because of the general implications of that statement? Well, it's not exactly clear, but regardless, this is when the mask starts to slip, and we see him genuinely upset and angry with the villain persona he's crafted for himself. And maybe Ragatha's comments helped him consider his actions by the end of the episode, but by the time he sees Ribbit's door, his decision to push Pomni away is absolutely finalized. Now, the scene after Jax and Pomni win the adventure is so intense and has so many layers, it would be a nightmare to go through the entire scene, so I will be keeping my summary very brief. But as Jax attempts to push Pomni away, she pushes back. She refuses to let him off the hook because she knows that Jax is more than just a villain, just an irredeemable asshole. She tries so hard to get him to see this, but his walls are too closed up. Jax tries so hard to act worse and worse, but also clearly doesn't enjoy doing so. When he tells Pomni he wouldn't care if she abstracted, he clearly regrets what he said. He looks panicked and stutters before brushing it off as a joke. He wants to be friends with Pomni. He obviously yearns for that connection, because he clearly got nervous when he hurt her, but he can't allow himself to get hurt again. So he begs Pomni to forget about him, to leave him alone, because according to him, there's nothing more to him. And funny enough, this was the moment I saw the Funnybunny vision. Now, as I'm writing for this video, the trailer for episode 7 has dropped and is slated to release in a week. So anything that happens in that episode will not impact anything in this video, if I don't get it out in time for, you know, the episode. But now, I want to talk about my interpretation of this ship and how it connects to the themes of the show. The Amazing Digital Circus is a show about humanity and connections. It's a show about finding joy in a world that sucks. And part of that joy is being with other people, helping and being helped. But what happens if you lose your connection to your humanity? Well, then you get Jax. Someone who has dissociated themselves from such frivolous things as friends and relationships. Someone who is so focused on self-preservation and personal survival over connections. But Pomni isn't like that. Yes, Pomni wants to survive, but more than anything, she wants to escape. Specifically escape with her humanity. She cares about her preservation, yes, but she cares about the other members of the circus. She wants to help them. She sees them as friends. Obviously, she's not a professional, and this situation is stressful for all of them. But she's earnest about how she feels, and she never hesitates to express that. Like I said earlier, she is observant and very smart. So when Jax pushes her away, she doesn't believe he's being honest, and why should she? She saw him vulnerable. She knows he can be vulnerable. She knows for certain he's more than what he claims to be, and she won't be swayed so easily. I think more than anything, however, Jax is scared. Scared that he'll get attached to someone and get hurt again. We don't know what really happened between Jax and Ribbit, but we do see that Jax can't even bring himself to think about Ribbit anymore because he gets emotional. And when I say that, I don't mean he gets sad emotional, I mean he's angry and dissociated emotional. And he's scared if he lets himself get close to Pomni, he'll lose her too. Of course, he couldn't help but get attached to her, much to his dismay. I very much enjoy fan content that portrays Jax as a pathetic yearner for Pomni, because he does yearn! He yearns for an honest connection, something Pomni can provide, but he's too scared to accept it. And if we go with the theories that Jax and Ribbit had some kind of falling out before Ribbit abstracted, that would put more of the personal blame onto Jax, hence why he gets mad when Pomni blames his kind of behavior on abstraction. But despite his best efforts, I honestly think Jax is closer to falling apart than he realizes, which makes me very worried for the next episodes. I also should discuss an aspect of Funnybunny as a ship that I think makes it stand out from other ships of its kind. Fandom is pretty obsessed with enemies to lovers as a ship trope, but enemies to lovers is also quite controversial, because a lot of people view these ships as problematic or even abusive. In my opinion, it really depends on a case-by-case basis from ship to ship. I've been known to enjoy an enemies to lovers ship from time to time, but I will admit I understand why some people don't like those ships, especially when it's between a man and a woman. The expectations are always on the female character to initiate the change in a horrible man. It's never on the man to change for the better. The woman has to inspire change. And that's made a lot of people frustrated with this trope, not even just in fandoms, but also just in general pop culture. And I think Funnybunny stands out to me because Pomni is not taking Jax's shit. She's not trying to prove Jax has something good deep down. She just wants him to cut the overdramatic crap. Pomni is not passive, quite the opposite actually, which makes the ship so much more refreshing. But also, over the course of the show, they've grown a mutual respect for each other. They began to see each other in a new light after episode 5, and in my opinion, a unique mutual respect is the key to making an enemies to lover ship actually work, and I think that's why, indisputably, I have so much more fun with this ship compared to other enemies to lover ships. But overall, I think Funnybunny stands out to me because it is ultimately a doomed relationship, which may sound weird, but let me explain. I personally think shipping can fit into a few different categories. There are ships that I would want to be definitively canon, there are ships that would be fun if they hypothetically became canon, and then there are sinking ships. Ships that I know will not and cannot be canon, but are still fun as hell to be on board for. Basically, ships that I don't want to be properly canon, but I would totally read a fanfiction for. I do not want Funnybunny to be canon because it is at its best when it is doomed, and I like that it is doomed. Which may sound fucked up, but work with me here. Funnybunny works when it's tragic because it is a dead-end relationship at its core. It can only work if Jax gets over his issues, which based on the teasers, he likely will not. Which is what makes their relationship so interesting to me. While Pomni works to better herself, Jax digs himself further and further into a worse place. Pomni is the representation of the average person, of humanity in a world of machines. She fights and refuses to accept the way the world is while Jax accepts his place. Not because he likes it, but because he feels he has no choice. He's stuck here and he has to deal with it. But Pomni wants to prove that he doesn't actually have to accept it. I think out of anyone in the circus, Pomni is the only one who could possibly help him. Jax doesn't like Ragatha's advice, Kinger is Kinger, and Gangle and Zooble hate him. Pomni is the only one there for him and the only one he can hypothetically lean on anymore. Of course, Jax has to be the one to take the steps necessary to change, something he clearly cannot do because he is self-destructive. He thinks he's saving himself future harm by directing it all inward, but it's not working and only making things worse for him. And also for everyone else around him. And the one person who could possibly help him, he pushed away. And that's what Funnybunny is all about, the tragedy, because the ship is doomed based on how the story is going. They can't be on the same page about the circus and their views on the situation because they're opposites at the end of the day. And that's what I like about it. Sure, I think the fluffy, wholesome content featuring the ship is cute, but the heart of this ship is the tragedy of a broken relationship that cannot be properly repaired. I do not want this ship to be happy and wholesome and canon. I know the ship is heading towards an iceberg, and I do not care. It's fun regardless, and that's what shipping is all about at the end of the day. So, yeah, I'm a Funnybunny shipper now, which is something that, honestly, I'm a little surprised by still, but hey, it's fun. And I'm super excited to see where this ship is heading, I say as if I don't have a good idea of where it's heading. But regardless, I'll have fun despite how sad this ship is likely going to make me. Let's all pray for Jax in episode 7.